Okay, let's look at today's discussion questions. Number one, Jassim asks Saleh, do you know what it means to lose a guest? What do you think that means? So this part we read in class last week. Let's look at page 95. Jassim says, that woman you left with me, Saleh. Zara, I said, and then reluctantly added, the beheader? Her, yes. I'm sorry I was not more careful. You put her in my care and she's dead for no good reason. Many people are dead, my friend. We can't let it destroy us. Some dead hurt more than others. She was no one to me, but she was my charge. She had eaten of my salt and rested her head in my home. She was my guest. Do you know what it means to lose a guest? So she was my charge means I was in charge of taking care of her. She had eaten food with me. She had slept in my home. And yet I had not protected her enough and I let her die. Why do you think this is especially painful or especially makes Jassim feel especially guilty? Well, the first part is, as he says, right? She was my responsibility. But here he's also referring to an ancient tradition that uh, it is uh, the host's sacred responsibility to ensure the safety of the guest. This tradition existed in many areas around the ancient world, especially in the Middle East and areas near the Mediterranean Sea. Um, think about this. In the ancient world, there were no good sources of information, no internet. You don't necessarily know much about the people around you or the people who visit. Um, so when someone comes to your door and you trust them and you let them in and you welcome them for a meal and a night of sleep, you're not just making sure that they are well fed and well rested like we do today. You're also making sure that if any kind of enemy shows up at your door, that you can protect this person who has trusted you with their life. The world is a scary place. It was much scarier in ancient times. This tradition appears in Homer, the earliest Greek epics. This tradition appears in the Bible. It appears in medieval literature. So, as Saleh says, every death is bad. But losing a guest, if you're the host, is especially bad. It means that you're not capable of engaging in civilized society. You're not able to welcome people into your home because you're not able to protect them. So, next time you go and visit a friend's place or a friend comes to visit your place, you are taking part in an ancient tradition and you must defend them from all enemies. Okay, do you have other thoughts about question one? All right, let's move on to question two. Do you think Saleh's mention of how the mere sight of an ankle could throw your world into disarray explains the Iranian morality police's ban at the time on women showing their ankles in public? Why or why not? So this question is talking about Iran has the regular police, and then they also have the religious police. And the religious police are in charge of making sure that people follow religious rules and laws. Um, Earlier this year, or was it late last year, the Iranian government announced that the religious police would no longer be enforcing wardrobe restrictions on women. But before that, according to the Iranian government's interpretation of Islam, women were not allowed to show their skin in public. So at most, you can show your face, but that's it. So, especially in the Western world, people came up with this stereotype of like, so if an Iranian man sees a woman's ankle, they would go crazy with lust because it's something that they're usually not allowed to see in public. So here, that's what Saleh is referring to. He seems to be coming up with an explanation for why or how merely seeing the ankle of a woman could throw your entire world into disorder. Let's take a look at the context on page 97. Let's start at the end of 96. Beforehand, we'd stopped at Jasim's home nearby and taken his little boy and girl out for ice cream. Their innocence was like fresh air. I thought of how during long stretches at the Seder, you no longer remembered there's a world of children in the back somewhere. So the Seder is the front line of the war. Unlike Iran, Iraq was a country swarming with kids in every street and alleyway. Yet you'd forget they existed at all, just as you tended to forget that half the world were women. You ached for them distantly and not in a sexual way. They were your mothers and sisters and beloveds, and they were not here, not one. The setting of the men of the Hasht turned desire inward until it was extinguished. So the men of the Hasht here refers to the fighters. You bottled it up and threw away the key until the next time you were, say, in Baghdad or Amman. Amman is the capital of Jordan. And then, in an instant, just the mere sight of an ankle could throw your world into disarray. You remembered who you were. You were not a ghost. So Saleh here seems to be talking about how war is mostly a place for men. There are women fighters, but most fighters are men, so that, as he says, the fighters spend many months where there's not a single woman. And so when they come back from the front, even seeing the mere ankle of a woman could upturn their entire world. Because if there are no women in their daily life, then, as he says, desire turned inward until it was extinguished. You bottled it up and threw away the key. So any residual desire is repressed, is forgotten, although, of course, it's never actually forgotten. It's hidden away. And so coming back, even seeing like the existence of a woman would suddenly bring all of that desire back. And so Saleh describes it as you remembered who you were. You remember that you are a person. You are a person with a body, with feelings and desires. So that transformation from a religious fighter to a full-blooded human being, Saleh calls that throwing your world into disarray, reorienting your world. So the question here, number 2, is this or could this be related to the Iranian morality police ban at the time on women showing any part of their body skin except for the face. Iran is not an entire country at war. And there are Iranian women going around in daily life. So it at first it does look like there might not be a connection here. So we can think about why the morality police or the religious police wanted to enforce this ban. Could it reflect more traditional ideas about how women were not supposed to be present outside in society? Uh, the traditional idea that women were supposed to stay home, so that the world outside of the home is a male centric one, and seeing a woman would have the same effect as Saleh describes for fighters who have not been around women for a long time. And yet, unlike those fighters, regular Iranian men would go home and supposedly meet the women in their home, right? They're, as Saleh mentioned, their mothers, their sisters, etc. So even from that perspective, the ban doesn't seem to make a lot of sense. So the ban seems targeted toward women that the men don't know, that are not already part of their family. And so it truly is oriented or targeted against sexual desire or ideas of romance. So again, this seems to be promoting a society in which uh, to meet new women, the women have to already be part of the man's life in some way. So it's not just random women on the street or, and yet, even for women that you do know, you would, when you meet them out of doors, they would also always be covered. So that also doesn't seem to make a lot of sense either. Um, so it seems like the ban would be trying to, as Saleh says, extinguish all desire. So if you're a man trying to meet women, um, think then like the first idea in your mind should be something like trying to form a, like trying to find a marriage, form a family, instead of sexual thoughts. Um, but at the same time as this, Saleh's description reminds us that desire is not actually extinguished; it's just repressed, and it can come roaring back with a vengeance uh, at the smallest infraction of the ban. So even showing a mere ankle can bring all of that desire back. So in a way, he's kind of criticizing the government's policy in not allowing women to show any skin except their face. Saleh is saying that it won't work because like even if they accidentally show something like an ankle for a mere moment, all of the desire that the government wants to wipe out will come roaring back. And also, as we were just talking about, it makes a mockery of society. If you do let women go around town and do their business, then you're kind of admitting that men and women will meet each other in the street. So the idea that men would be so unfamiliar with women that they would lose their minds at the mere sight of an ankle seems to be kind of a fairy tale, or at least it seems to be a situation that the ban itself creates. It's an artificial situation. Like, we in Taiwan don't have this kind of situation. We walk around, you can see women's hands, arms, legs, whatever, and it's not a big deal. We don't lose our minds when we see a woman's skin. So this situation that the Iranian government is trying to prevent is created precisely by the ban itself. It's the ban that creates the desire. The situation Saleh is talking about is in war, there are very few women because of the nature of war. But in society, women are everywhere. So the ban isn't trying to solve a problem, it's trying to create a problem and then solve the problem. It's an artificial situation. Um, Although speaking of women in war, women can fight in war. There's no inherent reason why women can't fight in war. It's just more traditional for men to go. But even in this novel, we have mentions of like Kurdish women fighting, and Saleh seems to have some obsession with these women fighters as well, which kind of proves the point, right? In a situation where not a lot of women are there, when you do see a woman, it's very unusual. It might invoke unusual feelings as well. So I guess like the irrationality of this ban is part of the reason why the Iranian police have stopped enforcing it. But another related reason is due to widespread protests by women themselves. I believe the news story was that one woman who was arrested for showing too much skin in public died in police custody. And so many women in Iran took to the streets to protest, first of all, the police treatment of women, and then secondly, the fact of the ban itself, which creates an excuse for police to arrest women. And then after many months of protest, the Iranian government was like, okay, we're not going to change the law, but we will stop enforcing the ban. And even after that announcement, the Iranian police still were arresting people here and there, but they gradually did, in fact, stop. So Iran still has religious police, but now they're more focused on other things and not on how women dress in public. And I guess that's a good example of how like Iran is a religion-based country, right? They call themselves the um, uh, what was it? Theocratic democracy. But it is still a limited democracy. Like if you shout loud enough, the government does still listen. But of course, for this kind of thing, the people shouldn't have to shout at all. Okay, do you have other thoughts or questions about number two? All right, if not, let's move on to number three. Why do you think Saleh says that one of us hung up instead of telling us who? 99. I thought this was a funny moment. We also covered this last week. So he's on a phone call with Atya. Atya is telling him that Mafiha has solved all his problems. Uh, and including Saleh's personal problem that his mother has died. Mafiha also apparently arranged her funeral. And of course, we remember that Saleh has a weird thing about Atya and Mafiha. It's kind of jealous and kind of resentful. But Mafiha doesn't let him justify his negative emotions. Mafiha is just unfailingly good to him. For Atya's sake, probably. But, not having a valid target for your negative emotions can make your negative emotions even stronger. If you have no one to blame, you can get even more angry. So the conclusion of their conversation, and let's start from the previous point. Ata is trying to get Saleh to return from the front, and Saleh doesn't tell her that he will go back. He says, "I will go to Erbil." Erbil is in Kurdistan or near Turkey, not Iran. So Ata is still kind of mad, wants him to come back. And thank your husband for arranging my mother's funeral. I'm sure he's the one who took care of that too. I know he's really doing all this for you, but I'll take it. I owe him in a big way. I'll even read his peace poems and try to like them. I'm not saying this with irony, honest. The fact that he has to say, I'm not saying this with irony, kind of points out that he is saying this with irony, right? I'll even try to read his peace poems and try to like them. So he's still calling them bad poetry. And when he says, I'm not saying this with irony, honest, he's trying to hide the fact that he does feel irony about his situation. One of us hung up. So, like, the question is, why doesn't Saleh tell us who hung up the phone? Who, like, ended the phone call? The most innocent reason could be that they both hang up at the same time. Do you think that's likely? I mean, given what the conversation looks like, it doesn't seem very likely to me. Right? Saleh has kind of agreed to give some kind of concession, but Atta is still trying to get him to come back to Tehran. It seems like they're not done talking. Like at least one of them has more to say. So the fact that both of them hang up, or the idea that both of them hang up at the same time, does not seem very likely. So what if it's Atya who hangs up first? She has been trying to convince him to come back to Tehran. Saleh, as usual, after bitching and moaning, finally agrees to some things, but he does not agree to come back to Tehran. If Atya is the first one to hang up, that means that she's like really pissed and has kind of given up Saleh for a lost cause. Like, fine, go and die. I don't care. That kind of idea. I mean, I guess she could do that, but it doesn't seem like the kind of person she is. If you remember her previous phone calls and conversations with Saleh, she seems to be the kind of person who keeps on asking and talking until Saleh agrees to what she wants. We haven't seen her give up on Saleh before. Well, what if it's Saleh who hangs up first? Um, he has started giving in to Atya, and he probably knows that if he keeps talking, he's going to end up agreeing to everything. So he quickly ends the conversation uh, so that he doesn't have to try to keep defending against Atya's request to return to Tehran. That seems more likely, right? So the question then becomes, why doesn't he say, I hang up? Why does he say one of us hang up or hung up? Why does he want to hide the fact that it was probably himself? We as readers, which person in this conversation do we tend to agree with more? at least for me, I think Atya makes more sense in this conversation. She's calling to tell Saleh Mafiha has solved all his problems. You should come back to Tehran. So, like, if the reason he left Tehran is to get away from his problems, now there's no reason for him to stay away. He should come back. And there's a job waiting for him also. He's now the head of the art section, I believe. So it seems like every reasonable option is just to do what Atya says. Um, and that would make Saleh look unreasonable or irrational. We do know that there is one thing keeping him at the front and not coming back, and that is all the way back in the first part of this book. He was talking about how, or not the first part, like 2 weeks ago, he was talking about how war kind of makes ordinary life boring, right? We were talking about how if you're spending every day with your comrades in a life or death situation, you're very clear that every action you take is to help your survival. And then you come back to a regular society and you attend events, you hang out with friends, and things start to feel like they're not as important as life or death. Um, the journalist Christopher Hedges has a famous quote: "War is a force that gives us meaning." When you're at war, it feels like your life is more meaningful. You're doing something useful, trying to help people stay alive, trying to end the war. So the only logically explainable reason for Saleh to prefer staying at the front is the psychology of war. Even though he can't see very well, even though he's always in danger of dying, even though he's leaving behind the people and the woman that he cares about, it does make life seem to have a bit more purpose. He does say, like, nothing means anything, the war is meaningless, but the war is happening whether he is here or there. That meaningless situation doesn't mean that life at home is more meaningful. There doesn't seem to be a lot of meaning anywhere. So war is slightly less meaningless than ordinary civilian life. But as you can tell from all of this explaining I have to do, it's not the most reasonable position to take. So perhaps in this moment when he's conceding things, when he's slowly admitting that Atya makes more sense and that he should listen to her, the fact that he chooses not to return like she asks is entirely unreasonable. He can't justify it either. He's being willful. He's not caring about the best idea. He just wants to do what he wants to do. So maybe he wants to kind of subconsciously hide this fact from the reader. If he says, I hang up or I hung up, he's admitting that he's ignoring all of Atya's good advice, and he's just hanging up because he wants to stay in war no matter what, regardless of reason or rationality, even regardless of self-interest. And maybe if he admits that clearly, he's afraid that we might start losing trust in him as the narrator of the story, as the person telling us what's going on. Like, the image we have of him currently is he's quite cynical, but he also understands people, and he has his own perspective on what's going on in that area of the world. And he's also kind of darkly funny. So he might not be the best person, But so far, he does seem to be a relatively trustworthy narrator. We can trust him to tell us things that actually happen, even if he adds his own interpretation, his own bias, uh, when explaining those things. But here he looks like he starts to lose that last layer of credibility. He's now behaving in such an irrational way that he himself cannot face himself. And so he tries to hide this fact from the reader. So just like this last sentence, I'm not saying this with irony, points out that he's very likely saying it with irony. By hiding who hangs up, he makes it even more likely that it is himself that hangs up. And by trying to hide his irrational behavior to try to maintain the reader's trust, he is in fact more clearly pointing to his own irrational behavior and more quickly losing the reader's trust. It backfires, in other words. At least that's how I see it. Um, I guess another interpretation would be like he's he's remembering these events from the future, right? The whole story is in past tense. So maybe he just forgets. But that would also be really weird because there have been so many phone calls, and every one of them until now, he remembers who hangs up. It's a very coincidental time for him to forget this kind of thing. So it does look like he's trying to make himself look better. And by doing so, he actually makes himself look worse. Or that's at least how I see it. Do you have other thoughts or questions about number 3? Okay, let's move on to number 4. Uh, and let me just say right now, like, I myself don't have a clear answer for the second question of number 4. I have some like ideas, but I don't think they make a lot of sense. So I do want to invite you to join me in thinking about this. What do you think Miss Homa means when she says that believing is like being asked for a dance and that her paintings are dance? Do you think it makes sense? Why or why not? Um, we can look at the context, but there is no context. She just kind of says this. So like Miss Homa is saying she's talking about religious matters. Like, do you think like it's really true what they say in the Quran or in the religious tradition? And then Saleh says, I did not realize you believe in these things. It's never late to believe, Saleh. It's like being asked for a dance. I always liked to dance when I was younger. I like to believe my paintings are dance. And that's it. So the only context we get is that they're talking about religious belief. And she says that religious belief is like being asked for a dance. Then she says, I'd like to believe my paintings are dance. And in the middle, you have this strange sentence, I always liked to dance when I was younger. If you think about it, this sentence doesn't really fit in this paragraph. It seems like Miss Homa is jumping from one idea to another, but there's not a lot of coherence in what she's saying. Probably because by this point she's almost dead. She's been fasting, not eating. She's has some kind of illness. She's tired. She wants to die. So it kind of makes sense that uh, maybe she's not entirely clear when she's trying to communicate. And that would help explain why what she's saying here is so mysterious. But no matter how far gone she is, she does have some kind of idea in mind that she's trying to say. So this question is asking, like, what do you think she means, and do you agree? The first part, religious belief is like being asked for a dance. Do you guys agree? I mean, well, I was going to say there are two kinds of religious belief, but are there? It does seem like if you believe, then you believe, and if you don't, then you don't. Um, and you can't really force someone or even yourself to believe in a religion. You can try to explain a religion to them. You can try to make it make sense, try to make it feel appealing, try to attract them to join a religious activity or ceremony. But just because you participate in a religious event or ceremony does not make you a believer. So, what is it that turns someone from a non believer to a believer? This is actually a very big philosophical and theological question. The answer seems to be nothing in this world. Theology, or like Christian theology, calls this the grace of God. One moment you don't believe, the next moment you believe. And it's not because of anything you do, it's because of something God does. Or that's what they say when they can't explain it. There are situations that make people more likely to become believers. If someone is feeling hopeless, if someone is facing difficulties, if they feel directionless, if they're looking for some kind of direction or purpose in life, they are more likely to become religious because religion does give you that. Religion is a worldview that attempts to explain life and the universe and your place in that world. So if you feel like you're missing direction or missing a purpose in life, if you're wondering, if you need to know why is life like this, um, a common answer people reach is religion, or provided by religion, I should say. But again, just because you are in that kind of situation does not guarantee that you will start believing in some kind of religion. There really is no like key factor. So in that sense, it's kind of like being asked to dance. Uh, Imagine you're a woman at a dance, you're sitting along like the side, waiting for a man to invite you to dance. You could be the prettiest woman at the dance. You could be wearing the best clothes. You could be the most attractive. And nothing would guarantee that a man would come and invite you to dance. It depends on the man. And I am sorry for, in this comparison, equating the man with God. I'm not saying that, blah, 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 but like it just happens to be what this comparison looks like. So this seems to be what Miss Homa is thinking about when she says that religious belief is like being asked for a dance. No matter how you try, you can't compel this. You kind of just have to wait for it to happen. You can make it more likely to happen, but in the end, you have to wait. And then the next part that I want to talk about, I'd like to believe my paintings are dance. We know that Miss Homa paints mosques and minarets, religious buildings, and that they have a kind of glow um, that makes them more beautiful. So there does seem to be a connection between her paintings and religion. You can say that they're about religious subjects. You can say that they have a kind of a religious vibe. So is she saying that her paintings are offering that invitation to believe to its viewers? Like, if you go and look at her paintings, you are more likely to become religious. Is she saying that the paintings are herself, her own way of preparing for religion? Like, the more she paints, or every time she paints, it's another invitation to God to make her religious. Or could she be talking about dance as a kind of art form? Because the previous sentence, she is thinking about when she was younger, she liked to dance. So if she's thinking about dancing as an art form, um, a patterned interaction between two individuals according to some kind of rhythm. So perhaps uh, she could be talking about how through the painting, she is in a dance with a viewer of her paintings. Like, the painting itself would provide the rhythm for her and her viewer to move together or to experience something together. Or is she talking about like the interplay of colors on her paintings, how they go together and interact with each other, kind of like two people who are dancing, or even not just two people, but like a room full of dancers, a dance event? It's a very mysterious sentence from someone who's trying to become a martyr and later succeeds. Um, why don't after we finish with question 5, I'll leave some time and then we can think more about this question together. Yeah, let's take a slightly longer break. And you can also think about this question during the break. Question 5. Why do you think the living are more immaterial than the dead? It's kind of a strange thing to say. Immaterial means, uh, literally, it means having less material existence. But figuratively, it means less important. And maybe that'll help us understand what Saleh means on page 103. So Miss Homa is here, starving herself, prepared to die. I tried to get Miss Homa to eat, but she would not budge about her fasting. Proust retired into himself and would only occasionally take up the slack for the barber. The barber had a name, but I cannot remember it now. Sometimes it seems that it is only the names of the dead I can recall, the living being immaterial. Miss Homa wasted to nothing by the hour, and the barber appeared to understand perfectly why we were here. He asked no questions. We were his pilgrims. He would not deny us. A woman had come to die in Samara. This, to him, was as good a reason as any to be in Samara. So when Saleh says the living are immaterial, um, the immediate provocation is that he only remembers the names of the dead, and this barber character, he doesn't remember his name at all. And I guess in a way that is understandable, right? We've been talking about death a lot this semester. The idea that death is the disappearance of someone who was previously in your life irrevocably. The person is not coming back. So it's like a hole ripped in your life, in your social fabric of existence. Everything related to that person um, has ended. I saw someone once describe it like a door being closed to a room that you can never open again. So in that sense, yes, death makes people more memorable. When you realize that you're not going to have any new memories with that person, you would cherish the old memories even more. And perhaps that's what's going on here, right? The barber, as far as Saleh knows, is still alive. There's no need to worry about him too much. Whereas Miss Homa, by the time Saleh is telling us this story, is dead. And so it's even more important that we remember her because she cannot fight for herself. She cannot create new memories for us. Uh, all that we have is what we have left. But we can also think about the literal meaning of immaterial, not having as much substance or as much material. In this context, Saleh is talking about Miss Homa, who is trying to become a martyr, a someone who dies for religion and hopefully ends up in heaven. So, like in terms of physical material, the living and the dead, uh, more like someone who has recently died. The living and the dead have about the same amount of physical material. Of course, as the dead person's body starts rotting, they lose that material. Um, but there's one thing that the dead, in this case, Miss Homa, will have that the living do not, and that is uh, the guarantee that their soul will be saved by religion. Uh, the soul has not entered the status of sacred integrity, the status of holiness. It is still caught in the middle, uncertain, unsure. We cannot be sure of the soul's holiness. So that is the one thing that the dead have more than the living, or at least in this case, this dead person. So immaterial in reference to religious belief or um, what one gains from religion spiritually. And that could also make sense as well. If you recall, when Saleh sees somebody who's prepared to be a martyr, he sees kind of a halo over their head, a kind of glow in their face. And he sees this um, in Miss Homa as well. See if I can find it. Here. Well, not here, sorry. Here, page 102. I knew the color of death. Miss Homa would die tonight, or tomorrow, or the next day. She was paler than ever. She had made sure to squeeze the last of life out of herself during this pilgrimage. I'd sometimes see it with other pilgrims of her age, too, a sort of counting down until the light went out, as if they were here to secure a spot for their own funeral march. And in doing so, they became angels. She was glowing, that familiar glow above the head. So, a halo. The glow I'd seen on all the martyrs up and down this country. So that glow, that halo, is the one thing that a soon to be dead person has more of than a regular living person. Do you guys have other thoughts about question 5 or today's discussion? Okay, so before next week, please finish the novel. Next week, after the discussion, I'm going to introduce the final exam. It says chapters 13 to 15. Just finish the whole thing. The last 3 chapters are quite short. Okay? Okay. Um, so now the next thing.